Stories up. So this program's a little different. I was telling Iris, this is almost like sitting down and watching, vacation slides, how you dread that when you go to somebody's house watching. So I've cut the number of slides down. Normally I do historic kind of preservation or historic research presentations, and that's not this. This is landscape photography. And so anyway, this is really more about my travels around Indiana and the landscape photography that I've done. I had a friend who now teaches photography at the academies in Culver, who told me one time, he said, Kurt, you get into all these really cool spaces that a lot of the public don't get to get into, and he goes, and you're traveling all over the place. He's like, you need to stop and smell the roses every once in a while, which meant, stop and take, pictures that are a little more artsy-fartsy than the documentation photos that I typically take. So that's what this is. So I have a story, just a short story about kind of how I got into photography. And I remember when I was, maybe 10, 11 years old, I told my grandmother that I wanted a camera for Christmas. Not that I was expecting her to get it, but that was, I was hoping that she would convey that to my parents. And she said, I have a 110 Kodak camera. Remember those little 110s, with the little flash tubes? And so she gave me that. And so one fall, you're going to see a lot of fall photos in this. One fall I went out and was shooting with that camera. And so that picture that you see on the right, yes, was like one of the first artsy photos that I took, when I was like 10, 11 years old or so. But then when I went to college, architecture students were required to take at least one photography course. And so most of us took black and white photography because we're architects, and that's just more artsy that way. And so the photo on the left is one that I took, and that's of our old truck stop, so Garner's truck stop, and that's just... So now you're seeing a progression. Now, I'm sorry to say, it only goes downhill from there. So you're going to be sorely disappointed. But, it's funny because 110 photography, on the right, and then slightly more sophisticated camera on the left, but still film photography. And now we all have cameras in our pockets, right? So when the moment hits and you realize that there's some kind of really bizarre light out on the pasture in front of your house, and you run out to see what it is, well, now you can capture these photos. And by the way, my cell phone is not even the best camera that's out there. But so I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of how this kind of came about. Yeah, now that is photo enhanced. So I'm not that good, or it wasn't that beautiful, but that's slightly photo enhanced. So that's our farm out north of town. And I'm going to show a few buildings, but really I'm going to do more landscape photography. And when I get to that, I'm going to walk it through by the seasons. So we'll obviously start with spring, and then we'll end in the winter. But this is our barn. It's just one of those things where you're really looking for the light to shine into the photos, and this, space. So this is our barn, and it's one of those things where you're looking for light, right? You're looking for the inside of a building, and I kind of think of buildings sometimes as conveying some spiritual kind of quality, and like churches obviously would, but barns can do it too. Gyms can do it too. So this is one of those moments where I was actually documenting this gym. It is, we think, if not the oldest gym in Indiana, it's certainly the oldest college gym. This is in Franklin College, and they're working through a restoration plan on this gym. And there's a basketball laying out on the floor, and it's getting the right perspective, right? Because having basketball on the floor says a lot more about the quality of that space than just the open space. And then sometimes you look for shapes, right? You guys probably recognize this, Jacoby Church out on King Road. I was out walking around, and all of a sudden, you kind of get this view that you don't typically think of. When you take a picture of a building, you're usually taking a picture of the front of the building. And I thought, well, I kind of saw the church through there, and White Oak and our preservation group has done a lot of restoration on it. And by the way, the tower is going to be restored. If anybody's been looking at that, so we're taking care of that. But it was kind of neat because that steeple is the same kind of form that some of those gravestones are. And so you kind of get that repetition of form. Light, right? This is an Anglican church down in Connersville, Indiana. Again, I was there doing documentation on it. And this is the pipes and the organ up in the organ pipe, whatever, loft. And I just kind of turned and it just glowed. And so the quality of the light, again, is something that you try to look for in photos. And sometimes it's just slowing down, right, and seeing things that are in front of you that you typically walk past on a pretty regular basis. How about that? I did not. I might have enhanced it just a tad. So this is the Adams County Courthouse in Decatur, Indiana. And Gene Stratton Porter, well-known Indiana author, is from Adams County. And I just stopped to take pictures of the courthouse, and there's this beam of light shining down on that rock. Now, how incredible is that? Sometimes it's about being in the right place at the right time, too, right? Or sometimes it's about looking up. So this is the Fountain County Courthouse down in Covington. And I love Art Deco architecture. It's a phenomenal Art Deco courthouse built during the New Deal era. And just the reflection of the light coming through that skylight onto the flag. It's pretty cool looking up through the staircase. I have no idea what this looks like now. This is our courthouse tower. That's the bell up in the courthouse. Sometimes it's being in places that not a lot of people get to go to. I know Linda and I have been there. How many have been up in the tower? A few of you, all right. And it's been restored since this photo was taken, so I don't know. I understand that there's been some changes inside there, so I'm hoping not too many, but if you've noticed the windows that are in each of the walls of the tower now, those weren't there originally, and so that's where those would go. So there's 3 of those vents on each wall, and the central one is now a window, like it was originally when it was first built. And then sometimes it's capturing things that are gone. How many recognize this? You know where this is? Yeah, on Jefferson Street. This is our old grain elevator here in town. That's not a documentation photo, but it serves as documentation. Sometimes it's setting the mood, right? This is on some property, farm property down in Floyd County, and it's set for redevelopment, and Indiana Landmarks asked if I would come into the property and take a look at things, kind of document stuff. I don't know if this is how the owners left it, but this is how I found it. So just kind of an interesting photo. There was also a snake skin that hung down from the ceiling about this long. Thankfully, it was not attached to the snake. And again, it's getting into some of these places that a lot of the public don't get to get into. And then you just stop and appreciate what's there. So this is the Newkirk Mansion in Connersville. Fabulous 1870s mansion that sits on a hill. And that spiral staircase is original. Goes up to a tower room. And you can look out over all of Connersville. Newkirk was furniture, he had an industry that built furniture. And of course, he wanted to look out over his factories that were in the downtown. Okay, Well, now we'll get to more landscape photos. And I'm gonna go through the Four Seasons, which is one of my favorite pieces by Vivaldi. So if somebody has a violin and wants to start playing along, do that. This is oh goodness, Fairmont Cemetery, our oldest cemetery in Marshall County. In spring, you know, capturing the dogwood tree in bloom there. I just love the color contrast, and you'll see that a lot. Moody. Anybody know where this is at? This one's not hard. Come on, Linda.
Well, isn't it Summit?
It's Summit, yeah, Summit Chapel Hills, or Summit School Cemetery. That's an old fence row of hedge apples, Osage orange trees, which just kind of have a gnarly kind of look to them themselves, but a very moody picture. There was a project that I was doing over by Syracuse, and I would go past this on a county road. I would go past these little grain bins, and I just thought they were the coolest thing. They sat up on the hill, you know, just kind of like streamed rural Indiana. Anybody know where that's at? Those are munitions bunkers. Kingsbury Ordnance Plant. Yep. Happened to be there when it was foggy. It was kind of it was like a late afternoon. But if you've never been, you have to go and get inside one of the bunkers. You can just walk in. Now, you have to walk back to it. I found that out the hard way. But it's a pretty impressive sight. So each one of those little hills that have trees growing on top of them are actually concrete vaults that have a steel door on the front. The doors are off, but you can go up into them. That is Turkey Run State Park. You're going to see a lot of state parks in these. That's down in the canyon. Anybody go fishing at Potato Creek? That's the one fishing wharf that goes out. Anybody recognize that?
7 pillars.
Yes. It's one of the 7 anyway.
Yeah.
That's 7 Pillars of the Missinawa. It's a site south of Peru that the Native Americans kind of held sacred. And actually that structure that you see on the right side, and you see one more at the very edge, there's 7 of those that kind of line the bluff there and are over the river.
You took our Wythogan group down.
You did?
I remember that.
That's Cataract Falls down in it's Owen County. It's technically a state park or state recreation site. You know where that's at, right? Michigan City, you know, it's Michigan City Harbor. And then there's man's imprint on the landscape, right? That's at the dunes as well.
That's neat.
Yeah, I had to time it just right.
Yeah.
Some more from the dunes. And I would encourage, you know, you don't think of the dunes as someplace to go hike. You think of about going to the beach, right? The trails out through there are fabulous. They're work, though. Sometimes it's just, you know, it's finding the right structure and just creating a photo from it. This is a place I just recently went to just last week, and you know, I was searching, you know, nature preserves around many of you know, I go to Southern Indiana, I work, and I'll stay down around the Bloomington, Nashville area. And so I looked for this nature preserve, and it was actually really pretty neat. It's just like a half hour west of Bloomington, but it's called Green's Bluff Nature Preserve, and it's because a fellow named Green had built a mill on the creek back there. But it has one of the few native hemlock stands in Indiana. It also has copperhead snakes. There's a creek that runs along it. I was telling my friend that was with me, I said, he's just wandering out into the long day. I'm like, hey, there are snakes down here. And then I posted some photos on Facebook, and a friend of ours said, hey, we saw a copperhead, just so you know. And sometimes it's about just the unique little details that God crafted into nature, right? Capturing the light, capturing the right color. Or capturing the sunset. Capturing the sunrise. That's at our farm. We have this long driveway that goes back up the hill to our house, and it's lined with sycamores, but then on the edge of the property, the farm property, there's a row of catalpas. And I was walking down to put mail in the mailbox, and noticed the sun coming through, and just thought that was a cool picture. This is another nature preserve. It's north of Williamsport, which is Warren County, I think. And it's called the Potholes. Has anybody heard of this? Been here? Hey, you've been there. All right, good. I went with a friend. I was doing some work down in Williamsport, and the client he's like, oh, you've got to come, we've got some time to kill. You've got to come see this site. And, I don't typically look for those nature preserve sites. I don't know why. I usually look for the state parks. But yeah, this was an interesting spot, and he slipped and came down pretty hard in one of the potholes, and so I knew where not to step. Kind of a late summer shot here. And it is just all about contrast and color. And this is if you've been to New Harmony or New Harmony State Park, you probably have passed by this barn. It's kind of at the south edge of the old state road that comes out of New Harmony going down to the state park. But yeah, my wife knows that we often have to pull the truck over to take photos. So, and I try not to trespass. I really do. But I might have gotten a little close to this. This one, and I don't know, you might have seen a photo of this before. I might have shared this before. But this is a little one-room schoolhouse in northern Randolph County that, man, I thought it was gone. I thought it was way too far gone, and the folks that contracted me to do a National Register nomination on it and do some of the initial preservation study on it, I thought they were crazy, but they were they were committed. There was no tower at that time, and there really was no roof at that time. So, but it's a fabulous little. How often do you see Gothic revival schoolhouses? So it's just fabulous little building. Again, contrast. This is it's a church and cemetery in southern Randolph County, and the church became a Methodist church, but it was originally a Quaker church. And when it became a Methodist church, they added the tower, because Quakers don't do towers, not typically, not old churches. But I was there looking for some of my ancestors' graves, and I found them. And right next to them were all these Shockneys. Well, that's a common name back here, but so I sent Alan Shockney. I said, "You don't happen to have ancestors buried in southern Randolph County?" He said, "Well, yes, I do." But I love the contrast in that. And sometimes it's not about pretty buildings, it's just capturing them correctly. Don't tell the Methodists I said that's not a pretty building. And then sometimes, you know, I often look for architecture that is kind of mimic, or I should say, architectures that mimics nature. And so the photo on your right is from McCormick's Creek State Park. It's down by the old Capitol building quarry. And then the building on the left, or the picture on the left, is from the Baptist Church in Camden, Indiana. And you know, it's, if you look at them, they're kind of playing off the same theme, right? You know, you've got the arched kind of top to the window and the gold kind of color, and then you also have the trees and how they kind of help form that crown, that arch. So I see it, I don't know. Does anybody else see it? If you don't want to offend me, that's fine. But the picture of the church, I was there doing documentation, and man, that sometimes you can get the best light through stained glass, you know, no flash, you know, just get the best light. And it was just kind of radiating off of that Bible that was there, that's on the little podium. And this is Marshall County. Hey, we've got beautiful things in Marshall County. Did you know that? This is up in Polk Township, Redwood Road. I can't remember quite which road it is. But I was coming back from a project, and every once in a while, well, back when I was county commissioner, I would drive our roads just to see how terrible they were because everybody was telling me this. I can't imagine, you know, that, but anyway, so, you know, the crops were just at the right color, the trees were just coming in, you know, you got that great barn in the background, and it's just, you just have to stop and take a photo, right? Anybody recognize that spot? I bet my dad does.
It looks like it was taken off the bridge or Oak Road.
Yep. When we were kids, and we'd go to church on Sunday nights, and that was in South Bend, we'd come back, and we would beg Dad to take us over the Spook Bridge. Does my sister remember this? Okay, yes. I'm not making it up, you know, that's why I said that. And so I started taking our kids over the bridge. Now the bridge has changed. The bridge was an old, late 19th century steel bridge. You could not see the other side when you went over it. Does anybody remember that old bridge on Oak Road? Okay, a few of you, all right. It was creepy, but I don't know if that's why it was called Spook Bridge. But anyway, I was out shooting one day and came back over the newer bridge that's there now and captured that fall color looking back toward La Paz. Bet you recognize that spot. Some of y'all have been down in River Park Square. That is my favorite tree along the river there on the left side or the right side. Big sprawling elm tree that, yeah. I think that was the trip that Andy Sheehan and I, Sue's son and I and Troy Shirk took down the river in our kayaks. Sometimes it's just about mood. That's a footbridge back behind the sledding hill. It's on the Greenway Trail. And I know I've showed this picture before. Does anybody recognize that location? Or remember from a previous presentation? That is the old channel of the Yellow River, southwest of town. So when they built the railroad through the Vandalia line, they kind of reconnoitered the river a little bit so that they didn't have to make more than one crossing. And so they cut the channel, which kind of loops up around behind the old O'Keefe house. They cut that off, and so on that kayaking trip, we didn't trespass at all. But we might have climbed up and walked the railroad bank down far enough to see this and capture that photo. That's up at Potato Creek State Park. I can't remember what trail that is, but it's the one that's off of, well, it's off of kind of the area that they're building the new inn at. So you go back to that site, it's on the right. That is at Kingsbury, so there's Kingsbury Ordnance Plant, and then there's Kingsbury Fish and Wildlife, I think is the right term. That's one of the marshes that you kind of, if you take the main road that goes all the way through the Ordnance Plant grounds, it will dead end at this site. The boat makes the picture, doesn't it? Doesn't the boat make the picture? So somebody was just asking about this. This is the Kankakee Fish and Wildlife area where the Yellow River and the Kankakee come together in Stark County. I think Mark Gidley was with me when I took this picture, and we got ran out of there. I forgot what it was. Might have been hunting season, I don't know.
Oh.
That's why I have an orange hat. Isn't that cool? That's Indiana still. So that's, so just about where the Ohio and the Wabash meet, there's a place in Posey County called Hovey. I think it's Hovey, it might be Hovey Fish and Wildlife or State Rec, whatever. Yeah, those are bald cypress trees growing out in the wetlands there. That was one of my first photos with my digital camera. That is that's Straw Lake at Brown County State Park. I mean, the reflection was perfect. Yeah, yeah. There were no fish jumping up and down. Yeah, I love that photo. Trying to capture some structures in the natural landscape. This is also Brown County State Park. This is some of that New Deal era work, the WPA did. This is Wallow Hollow Road in Brown County. I love the names of their roads down there. Wallow Hollow. I have a story about this. So the cabin that I usually stay in when I work down in southern Indiana is right around the bend here. So it would be right off to the left. There's a little creek that runs along the left side of this road. I have been stranded on that road because of storms that come through. Like, it is not much of a road. But the first time I went to that cabin, I was coming down from the Martinsville area. So I was coming down on, 135. And I plugged in, because Siri knows everything. So I plugged in the location thinking, surely I don't have to go all the way back down into town and come back around. Because this is kind of a little northeast of Nashville. And so I plugged it in, takes us down this road, and it was dark, and I was like, this is a logging road. I know this is a logging road. It can't be anything more. Now, it's been improved a little bit since then, but I think the first time I was down there was about 8 years ago. And, but it is a fabulous little, Brown County, back road. And I went out, I got in a little early, and I went out and was shooting this photo. This, I think, was about 2 years ago. And if you can see, I even captured leaves falling, kind of in that tunnel of trees back there. You'll see a lot from Brown County. I like going there. My mom complains I don't take her down there enough. Anybody recognize this spot? Does Jack recognize this spot?
I don't think so.
This is Sycamore Row off of Highway 29. So this is the Michigan Road in Carroll County. Sycamore Row was, do you know what I'm talking about when I say Sycamore Row? Probably a few of you do.
Is that the one that has all
The trees
trees
along each side, and there's all these different legends about how those trees got there, but,
Stubby.
what?
Captain Stubby. Those are radio personality that help to save the trees.
Thank you. That is true, and it's interesting. So Sycamore Row is now listed on the National Register because of the conservation efforts to try to save the trees over 100 years, over a century. They had been trying to save these trees. So one of the theories is that the trees grew from, so you know what a corduroy road is, right? So a log road. Everybody learned this in 4th grade Indiana history, right? And the thought was that the tree sprouted from green logs that were cut, which can happen. Having written the National Register nomination on it, there are like 4 different theories about how those trees came to be. So none of them can be ruled out, but none of them can be proven either. So, this is actually, there's a group in Carroll County that have maintained and replanted many of the trees just north of this location, but I walked all the way back into the trees that had not been cleared yet, so I'm all the way back to Deer Creek. So Deer Creek, there's a bridge there, and if you look off to your to the west, that's where Sycamore Row is. But I walked back in there to take the picture back out, and I just, something about that was more impressive than being up in the, don't tell the Carroll County folks this, being up where they had cleared everything out. It just had more age to it, I don't know. Some big trees back there. This is up at the dunes, so that we're getting to, very late fall here. This is Cowles Bog, which is actually at the Indiana Dunes National Park, not the state park. This is a route that kind of takes you up and over the dunes and down to Cowles Bog. Does anybody hike back in there? Go up to the dunes, do some hiking. Did I hear somebody was too old? Is that what I heard? You're never too old. And this is what awaits you when you get to the end of Cowles Bog. So, this was, and being up in the dunes, kind of in that late fall, winter time, is actually kind of a neat time to go.
Wow, I like that.
Yeah, that is Whitewater River State Park down in down south of Liberty. I can't think of what county that is, but Whitewater River State Park was a WPA era park that was developed, and that's the White River. And who says that that time of the year can't be beautiful? I mean, it's pretty stunning. But again, it's when you compose a picture, you're trying to find something that's an object that helps you kind of help tell the story. And so these long ago trees that have been washed over and worn over by the river, I think helps tell the story. Now we're into winter. So do anybody recognize this location? Very colorful, isn't it, for being in the winter, right? This is Turkey Run State Park. This picture is taken from the pedestrian bridge, the suspension bridge that goes over, no, Sugar Creek. Again, it's a winter shot here. This is Hemlock Cliffs. It's in Hoosier National Forest. It's called Hemlock Cliffs area or trail. Again, hemlock trees there. There's a fall. No, excuse me. Hemlock Falls. Something about that didn't sound right to me. But some great stone outcroppings and stuff. And the beech trees, they hang on to their leaves much later, all the way through the winter. So it makes for actually a pretty colorful shot. So I do like to go out and shoot. I never take days off. I took a day off to go out and shoot a couple of years ago, and I'd always wanted to drive along the Eel River Road. So if you go south on 31 and you're getting into Miami County, you cross over the Eel River and you'll see a sign that says Eel River Road. And so I kind of like driving along riverways. And so I just went out, it was like December, I just went out and shot. And man, the sycamore trees are what, kind of make that photo, right? Anybody know what that is? Somebody has got to know what that is. Anybody have any guesses?
It's an old mill.
It's an old lock on a canal.
Oh, lost.
So this is just outside of Metamora. This is on the Whitewater Canal. Some of the locks have been restored. This one is it's in need of restoration. I did a project down there early 2022, and was actually, because I had never, other than visiting Metamora once, I'd never really been to see any of the other structures that were associated with that canal. And it's actually pretty remarkable how many are there. There's actually a walkway, bikeway that runs the whole length of the state property from starting in Laurel, Indiana, which is kind of at the northern end of Franklin County, down to just beyond Metamora. So if you're really feeling adventurous, get your bike out and take a bike ride, and you can see all the locks. I think there's 12 locks that are still there. This is a James Covered Bridge. This is in Jennings County. It's one of their 2 covered bridges that remain. And sometimes it's just about color and perspective, right? That's what makes the photo. Got a little bit of snow on the ground. Perspective. That's Yellowwood State Forest, so again in Brown County. I haven't said this, maybe I should say this. So a friend of mine works for State Farm or something or another. He's an agent. He's probably mortified that I wouldn't know what company it is. But anyway, he was assigned the responsibility of putting together their calendar for next year. And so he asked for my photos. So my photos will be the calendar for one of the insurance companies. I don't know which one. I know it's not the one we have, so I did expect some free. But anyway, they had assigned months for the photos, and they had this one in July. And I said, you better take a closer look. There's no leaves on the tree. And who said that winter can't be colorful? This is in Yellowwood again. I'm just picking up the hues from a setting sun, and you get some blues and purples in that. That's Yellowwood again, and I got those geese swimming away. But so much color and contrast in that. That's, anybody recognize that spot? It's a state park. That's McCormick's Creek, so that's McCormick's Falls or Canyon Falls. Some of these photos, I'd always wanted to get to these places when there was snow on the ground, and I got really lucky this last year because they had more snow in southern Indiana than we had here, but there was snow in Brown County and at Turkey Run. You'll see some of those photos here in a second. Okay, speaking of, that's Straw Lake. So that picture that had the reflection in the lake, that's the same lake. That was a very snowy hike. It was warm that day, thankfully, but it was a snowy hike. That's a suspension bridge at Turkey Run. They had a lot of snow down there this year. The guy who's been here to a presentation before that does some of my drone work, Jeff Chamberlain, he went with me on this trip because I thought he might find this cool. And so we headed down to Turkey Run. It was -2 when we woke up in the morning, and I said, let's let it get to about 5 degrees, before we head out. So it was about 5 degrees when we did the pictures. That's going up to Sunset Point at Turkey Run. So if you've kind of been down there, there's one place that looks down the creek, and that's it. That's also at Turkey Run. There's a covered bridge at the kind of east end of the park. And then the Lusk House, if anybody's been there, they've got a brick home that sits up on the hill, and the bridge is right below it. You just barely make out the house, but the house is up on the hill there. It's our river again. We had one really snowy New Year's back in, I think it was 2006 or 7. And I just went out and was shooting pictures. This is the river from Oak Hill Avenue. So going across the river. I think I'm looking south there. Recognize that place, right? It was the same little photo trip. I went out and took that. Sometimes it's about feeling, right? Getting the right feeling. That I call that Brush Creek. It's actually the Something Right Ditch, but it was originally known as Brush Creek. This is at the corner, northwest corner of our farm. That's the Vandalia Railroad Bridge. I might have shown this photo before when I talked about railroads, but maybe that was a picture that I took before we even moved in there. I think we had just purchased the farm. And that's it. That's our barn, what we call Sycamore Hill. There you go. That's it. I didn't bore anybody too much, did I? All right. Well, then I accomplished something.